The pounding on my door at 7 in the morning would have been annoying on any day, but when the temperature outside was hovering at negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, it was downright aggressive. I stumbled out of bed, my breath visible even inside my drafty townhouse in Boulder, Colorado, and shuffled to the front door in my thermal pajamas and wool socks. Through the peephole, I could see Patricia Hendricks, the president of our Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, standing there with her arms crossed, her perfectly styled blonde hair somehow immune to the brutal wind that was rattling my windows. I opened the door just wide enough to keep the Arctic air from flooding in completely. "Patricia, it's 7 in the morning, and it's freezing, Robert Zimmerman, which is exactly why I'm here." She pushed past me into my living room before I could protest, bringing a gust of frigid air with her. Her eyes immediately locked onto the 3 industrial-grade space heaters I had running in my living room, their orange coils glowing warmly. "I need to borrow these." I closed the door and turned to face her, confused. "You need to borrow my space heaters?" "Yes, for the HOA Winter Gala tonight at the community center." She was already walking toward the nearest one, reaching down to unplug it. "Our heating system is completely overwhelmed, and we have 75 people coming. The party must go on." I stepped between her and my heaters. "Patricia, in case you haven't noticed, my heating system is also overwhelmed. That's why I have these running. The furnace in this unit can barely keep it at 60 degrees, and that's with supplemental heat." She waved her hand dismissively. "You're one person, Robert. We're talking about a community event. 75 people who have been looking forward to this for months. Surely you can sacrifice a little comfort for the good of the community." I rubbed my temples, already feeling a headache forming. "No, Patricia, you can't borrow my space heaters. Buy your own if you need them that badly." Her face transformed into that particular expression I'd seen countless times at HOA meetings, the one that said she was about to make someone's life miserable. "Actually, Robert, according to Section 8, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws, all residents are required to contribute to community events when called upon. I'm calling upon you. These heaters are needed for a sanctioned HOA event, which means you're obligated to provide them." That section refers to reasonable requests for things like folding chairs and coolers, not essential heating equipment during a record-breaking cold snap. I'd read those bylaws front to back when I moved in 2 years ago, specifically because I'd heard horror stories about Patricia's creative interpretations. I'm the HOA president, and I determine what's reasonable. She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'm documenting your refusal to cooperate with a direct HOA request. This will be noted in your file and discussed at the next board meeting. You could be facing fines." What Patricia didn't know, and what I'd never bothered to mention at HOA meetings because it wasn't relevant to neighborhood matters, was that I was the fire marshal for Boulder County. I'd been in the position for 8 years, and I'd seen every kind of fire hazard imaginable. The scenario she was describing, cramming 75 people into our undersized community center with multiple space heaters running, was exactly the kind of setup that led to disasters. "Patricia, even if I were inclined to help, which I'm not, running multiple high-wattage space heaters in a crowded community space is dangerous. The community center wasn't designed for that kind of electrical load." "Oh, please, you're being dramatic." She moved toward another heater. "I'm taking these. Consider it your community contribution for the year." I physically blocked her path. "You're not taking my property, Patricia, and I'm strongly advising you not to proceed with overloading the community center with space heaters." "Is that a threat?" Her voice went up an octave. "Because I can call the police right now for harassment." It's not a threat, it's a safety warning. As fire marshal, oh, here we go. She threw her hands up. You think because you have some little government job that you can lord it over the rest of us. The HOA has authority over this community, not your fire department. Those are two completely separate jurisdictions. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper wouldn't help. Patricia, the fire code applies everywhere, including HOA property. If you're planning to run multiple space heaters in the community center tonight, I need to inspect the setup first to ensure it's safe. You'll do no such thing. This is HOA property, and you have no right to interfere with our events. Now, I'm taking these heaters, and if you continue to obstruct me, I'll have no choice but to issue a formal citation and fine. $500 for failure to comply with HOA directives. Get out of my house, Patricia. Her eyes narrowed. You're making a huge mistake, Robert. The HOA board will hear about this, and trust me, we have ways of making non-compliant residents regret their decisions. I'm aware of your tactics. I've watched you bully half the neighborhood over the past 2 years. But you're not taking my heaters, and I'm warning you officially that overcrowding the community center with supplemental heating equipment during this freeze is dangerous. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of my space heaters. Documented. You have 3 of these running simultaneously in a residential unit. I'm sure that's not up to code either. Perhaps I should file a complaint with your supervisors about the fire marshal not following his own rules. Those are properly rated for residential use, on separate circuits, with adequate clearance from combustible materials. Feel free to file whatever complaint you want. Patricia stormed toward the door, then turned back with a venomous smile. You know what, Robert? Fine. Keep your precious heaters. I'll find my own. And tonight, when everyone is enjoying the winter gala in a nice warm community center, I want you to think about how you chose your own comfort over your neighbor's happiness. We'll remember this. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there for a moment, listening to her angry footsteps crunching through the frozen snow outside, then returned to my heaters and cranked them up a bit higher. My townhouse was an end unit, older construction, and the insulation was a joke. Without these heaters, I'd be sleeping in my car with the engine running. I made coffee and settled into my home office to catch up on paperwork. The weather had been brutal for the past week, with temperatures dropping to levels Colorado hadn't seen in decades. We'd responded to dozens of calls for structure fires caused by people using unsafe heating methods, carbon monoxide poisoning from people running generators indoors, and frozen pipes bursting and causing electrical hazards. My team was stretched thin, and I was supposed to be taking a rare day off. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 3 units down. Did Patricia just come after you for heaters? She tried to take mine too. I told her to pound sand. I called him instead of texting back. Yeah, she showed up at 7 this morning demanding I hand them over for tonight's party. She's lost her mind, Marcus said. I could hear his 2 young daughters arguing in the background. Sarah from across the street said Patricia went to her place too, and when she refused, Patricia threatened to fine her for having Christmas lights up past January 5th. It's January 4th. That sounds like Patricia. Did she say where she was planning to get heaters? Sarah heard her on the phone with Home Depot, freaking out because they're sold out everywhere. I think she was planning to drive to Denver to find some. Marcus paused. She's really going through with this party, apparently. I tried to warn her about the safety issues, but she wasn't hearing it. Well, good luck with that. Jen and I decided to skip the gala this year anyway. Too cold to get the girls bundled up and out the door for what's basically a glorified potluck. where Patricia spends 2 hours congratulating herself on running the HOA. After we hung up, I tried to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be a disaster. Patricia was stubborn and vindictive, a dangerous combination when mixed with a total disregard for safety regulations. Around noon, I decided to drive by the community center to see what was happening. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center was a modest single-story building at the center of our development, probably built in the early 90s. It had a main hall that could hold maybe 100 people if you really packed them in, a small kitchen, and 2 bathrooms. The parking lot was already busy with people coming and going, decorating for tonight's event. I parked and walked up to the building, immediately noticing the power company truck in the lot. A technician was up on a pole, working on the transformer. That wasn't a good sign. Inside, the temperature was barely warmer than outside. Patricia was directing traffic, pointing people toward different corners of the room with garland and banners. She spotted me immediately and marched over. "You're not welcome here, Robert. This is an HOA event, and you made your position very clear this morning. I'm not here to cause trouble. I wanted to check on the heating situation. It's none of your concern. We have everything under control." She gestured toward a corner where I could see at least 6 brand new space heaters still in their boxes. "See, problem solved. No thanks to you." My stomach dropped. Those were the cheap consumer-grade heaters, probably 1,500 watts each. "Patricia, where are you planning to plug those in?" "In the outlets, obviously. Where else would I plug them in? How many circuits does this building have? How should I know? That's not my job. The building has outlets and we have heaters. Simple math, Robert." "It's not simple math, it's electrical load calculation. This building is old, and I'm willing to bet it's only got a few 20-amp circuits for the whole space. If you plug in 6 space heaters plus lighting, sound equipment, and whatever else you're running, you're going to overload the system." She crossed her arms. "The power company is outside right now upgrading our service because I called them. They said they'd have everything ready by this afternoon. So your concerns, as usual, are completely unfounded." I walked outside and found the technician, a guy named Dave I'd worked with on a few emergency calls. "Hey Dave, what are you doing here?" He looked down from the pole and shook his head. "Hey Robert, HOA president called in claiming they had an emergency power issue. I came out to check it and the system is fine. She wanted me to upgrade the transformer to handle more load, but that's not how this works. She'd need to apply for a service upgrade, have an electrician rewire the building, inspection, the whole 9 yards. I told her that, and she started yelling about how she's having an event tonight and we're required to help. I'm just checking the connections to make sure everything is solid. She's planning to run at least 6 space heaters in there tonight with 75 people." Dave's eyes widened. "In that building, Robert, that's a disaster waiting to happen. The electrical system in there is original to the building. I'd be surprised if it could handle 3 heaters without tripping breakers, let alone 6. I know. I tried to warn her. Can't you do something? You're the fire marshal." "I can if I see an immediate hazard. Right now, it's just heaters in boxes. But tonight, if she sets this up the way she's planning, I'll have grounds to shut it down." Dave climbed down from the pole. "I'll document what I told her in my report. If something happens, at least there's a paper trail showing she was warned." I went back inside and found Patricia in the kitchen, arranging dessert plates. "Patricia, I spoke to the power company tech. He said the building can't handle the electrical load you're planning. He said the current system is fine, which is all I needed to hear. That's not what he meant, and you know it." She spun around, her face flushed. "Why are you doing this, Robert? Why are you trying to ruin this event? Is this because I called you out at last month's meeting for not trimming your shrubs back the required 12 inches from the sidewalk? Are you really that petty? This has nothing to do with shrubs or HOA politics. This is about safety. You're creating a dangerous situation. Get out. You're not a guest at this event. You're not helping set up, and you're certainly not welcome to stand here and lecture me about safety. I've organized dozens of community events without incident, not during a record freeze with inadequate heating and overloaded electrical systems. Out. She pointed at the door. And if you show up tonight without an invitation, I'll have you removed for trespassing. I left, knowing that arguing further was pointless. Back home, I called my deputy chief, Angela Morrison, and filled her in on the situation. So what do you want to do? She asked. We can't just show up and shut down an event before it starts unless we have evidence of an imminent hazard. I know, but I'm going to be in the area tonight. If she sets up the way she was planning, I'll have grounds for an inspection. Robert, be careful. HOA drama aside, you need to follow protocol. If you shut down her party on what she sees as a technicality, it's going to blow up. I'm not looking to make trouble, but I'm not going to ignore a fire hazard just because it's inconvenient for Patricia Hendricks. The afternoon dragged on. I tried to relax, watch some TV, catch up on reading, but my mind kept drifting back to that community center. Around 5 o'clock, I got a call from another neighbor, Tom Wright, who was on the HOA board. Robert, I heard about this morning. I want to apologize on behalf of the board. Patricia had no right to demand your property. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. But I'm calling because I'm at the community center now and I'm concerned. She's got these heaters set up and the breakers keep tripping. She's getting more and more agitated. A couple of board members suggested postponing until the weather improves, but she's refusing. She said it would make the HOA look weak. How many heaters does she have running? She brought 6, but she can only get 2 running at a time before the power cuts out. So now she's got people running extension cords from the outdoor outlets, and someone mentioned the outlets in the bathrooms are on separate circuits, so she's trying to set up heaters in there too. Jesus Christ. Tom, that's exactly what I was worried about. Extension cords and space heaters are a terrible combination, especially the cheap residential ones. And putting heaters in bathrooms creates a huge hazard if they get wet or someone knocks them over. Can you come down here? Maybe if she hears it from you officially, she'll listen. She already kicked me out once today and told me I'd be removed for trespassing if I came back. I'm inviting you. I'm on the board and I have the authority to invite guests. Please, Robert, I don't want anyone getting hurt tonight. I changed into clothes that made my position clear. Black tactical pants, black boots, and my fire marshal polo, with the department badge embroidered on the chest. I grabbed my inspection clipboard and headed out into the brutal cold. The community center parking lot was packed when I arrived at 6:30. People were hurrying from their cars to the building, hunched against the wind. Inside, the transformation was impressive. Patricia and her team had decorated the space with white lights, silver garland, and elegant table settings. A DJ was setting up in the corner, and the buffet tables were laden with food. But the temperature was still freezing, and I could see my breath even inside. The 6 space heaters were scattered around the room, all running, all plugged into orange extension cords that snaked across the floor and disappeared in various directions. 2 more heaters were visible in the bathrooms through open doors. People were clustering around each heat source, rubbing their hands together and stamping their feet. Patricia saw me immediately. She was wearing a sparkly silver dress that must have cost a fortune, and her expression went nuclear. "What are you doing here?" I specifically told you that you weren't welcome. Tom Wright invited me as his guest, and I'm not here as a guest anyway, Patricia. I'm here as the fire marshal. I pulled out my badge and held it up. This is an official inspection. The room went quiet. The DJ stopped adjusting his equipment. Everyone turned to stare. You can't do this, Patricia hissed. You're harassing me because of a personal grudge. This is an abuse of power, and I'll be filing a complaint first thing Monday morning. I pulled out my inspection form and clicked my pen. I observed multiple fire code violations from the parking lot, and I'm observing additional violations now. You have 8 space heaters running in a structure that isn't rated for that electrical load, multiple extension cords creating trip hazards and fire risks, heating equipment in bathrooms where they can come into contact with water, and inadequate egress routes with all these people and equipment. These heaters are all brand new, purchased today from a reputable store. They're perfectly safe. Consumer-grade space heaters are the #1 cause of residential fires in the United States. When used improperly, which is what's happening here, they're extremely dangerous. I walked over to the nearest heater and checked the extension cord. This is a 16-gauge cord. These heaters need at least 14-gauge, preferably 12-gauge. This cord is getting hot. I touched the cord, and it was indeed warm to the touch. Patricia followed me, her heels clicking on the floor. You're making a scene over nothing. People are cold, Robert. Are you really going to stand there and tell all these people they have to leave because you're on some kind of power trip? Tom Wright stepped forward. Patricia, maybe we should listen to him. I've been worried about these extension cords myself. You invited him. Patricia whirled on Tom. You betrayed the board, betrayed the HOA, and betrayed this entire community. Consider yourself removed from the board, effective immediately. You can't do that, Tom said. Board removal requires a vote. I'll call an emergency vote right now. Patricia raised her voice. Everyone, we're going to have a quick vote. Tom Wright has invited an outside agitator to disrupt our event. All in favor of removing him from the board, raise your hands. A few confused people raised their hands halfway, not sure what was happening. Most people just looked uncomfortable. I'd had enough. This isn't a debate, Patricia. I'm shutting down this event under Section 1204 of the Colorado Fire Code, which states that the fire marshal has the authority to prohibit any occupancy that constitutes a distinct hazard to life. This setup is a clear violation of multiple fire codes. I'll sue you personally, Patricia said. I'll sue the fire department, I'll sue the county. You're ruining months of planning, disappointing dozens of people, and destroying the reputation of this HOA. You're welcome to sue whoever you want. But right now, I need everyone to calmly exit the building. The event is over. A woman I recognized as Helen Sawyer, Patricia's right hand in all HOA matters, spoke up. You can't just kick us out into the cold. It's dangerous out there. It's more dangerous in here. Everyone needs to leave now, and Patricia needs to shut down these heaters before the electrical system fails or something catches fire. I'm not doing anything, Patricia said. Everyone stay put. Enjoy your food, enjoy the music. The fire marshal is bluffing. He can't actually make us leave. I pulled out my radio. Dispatch, this is Fire Marshal Zimmerman. I need a unit at the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center, 4200 Willow Creek Drive, to assist with an event shutdown due to fire code violations. The DJ, smart enough to read the room, started packing up his equipment. Several people began edging toward the door, clearly not wanting to be part of whatever was about to happen. But Patricia stood her ground, blocking the path to the nearest heater. You want to shut down these heaters? You'll have to go through me. Patricia, don't do this. I'm giving you a direct order to power down the equipment, and evacuate the building. If you refuse, you're in violation of Colorado Revised Statute 2433.512, which makes it a Class 2 misdemeanor to obstruct a fire marshal in the performance of their duties. Fine me then. Write your little citation, but I'm not ruining this event. The door opened and 2 firefighters from Station 7 entered. I recognized Jake Peterson and Maria Gonzalez immediately. I'd worked with both of them for years. "Hey, Chief," Jake said. "What do you need?" "I need everyone evacuated from this building, and I need these heaters unplugged and removed. The owner is refusing to comply." Maria started directing people toward the exits while Jake began unplugging heaters. Patricia screamed, actually screamed like someone was attacking her. "No, stop it. You have no right." She grabbed the heater Jake was trying to move, and they had a brief tug of war before Jake stepped back, not wanting to hurt her. Patricia turned to the crowd of people who were slowly filing out, many of them carrying plates of food they didn't want to waste. "Everyone, please, stay. This is our community event. Don't let them intimidate you." Helen Sawyer put a hand on Patricia's shoulder. "Patricia, honey, let it go. It's too cold anyway. We'll reschedule." "We will not reschedule," Patricia's voice cracked. "I spent 3 months planning this. I spent HOA funds on decorations, food, and equipment. This is sabotage." I stepped closer, keeping my voice level. "Patricia Hendricks, I'm officially ordering you to cease operation of this event and comply with the evacuation order. If you continue to refuse, I'll have no choice but to place you under arrest for obstruction." "You can't arrest me. You're fire marshal, not a police officer. Colorado law grants me the authority to arrest anyone who willfully obstructs fire department operations. Check the statute yourself." Jake and Maria had cleared out most of the guests at this point. Tom Wright was helping carry food to people's cars so it wouldn't go to waste. The building was empty except for Patricia, Helen, me, and the 2 firefighters. Patricia finally seemed to realize she'd lost. She sank into a chair, her perfect hair falling in front of her face. "You've ruined everything. I prevented a potential disaster." These heaters were going to trip the electrical system, and with this many people clustered around heat sources with extension cords everywhere, the risk of fire was substantial. Helen started unplugging the heaters. "Patricia, let's just go home. We'll figure out the rescheduling later." But Patricia wasn't done. She looked up at me with pure venom in her eyes. "This isn't over, Robert. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did here tonight. I'm going to file complaints with every agency I can find. And at the next HOA meeting, we're going to discuss your continued residence in this community. There are provisions for removing residents who are detrimental to the community welfare. You can't evict someone for doing their job, Patricia. We'll see about that." Jake and Maria helped remove all the heaters from the building while I did a final walkthrough to document the violations. I took photos of the extension cords, the outlet configurations, and the general setup. It was all going in my report. Outside, small groups of people stood in the parking lot, talking in low voices. A few gave me dirty looks. Most just looked tired and cold and ready to go home. Tom Wright approached me as I was putting my equipment back in my truck. "Robert, thanks for coming. I know this was uncomfortable, but you did the right thing." Uncomfortable is an understatement. Patricia's going to make my life hell. She's already making everyone's life hell. You just became her primary target. Tom glanced back at the community center, where Patricia was still inside with Helen. "For what it's worth, I'm going to propose at the next board meeting that we hire a professional event planner for future gatherings, someone who actually knows safety regulations. Good luck with that." Patricia seems pretty entrenched. "Yeah, well, maybe this will be a wake-up call, or maybe she'll double down. With Patricia, you never know." I drove home through the frozen streets, my truck's heater blasting. My phone started buzzing before I even made it to my driveway. Text after text from neighbors, some supportive, some angry, some just asking what happened. I ignored them all and went inside to thaw out next to my own space heaters. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Patricia Hendricks sent to the entire HOA mailing list at 2 in the morning. The subject line was, "Fire Marshal Abuses Power, Ruins Community Event." The body of the email was a 3-page rant about how I'd sabotaged the winter gala out of spite, how I'd embarrassed the HOA in front of the entire community, and how she was calling for an emergency meeting to discuss my behavior and potential consequences. I forwarded it to my supervisor, County Commissioner Richard Torres, with a brief explanation of what had actually happened. He called me 10 minutes later. "Robert, I got your email. I also got a call from Patricia Hendricks at 6 this morning, screaming about lawsuits and abuse of power." I documented everything, Commissioner. I had clear grounds for the shutdown. "I know you did. I trust your judgment, but this is going to get messy. She's threatening to go to the media, to call the governor's office, to file complaints with every oversight agency. She's not going to let this go." "What do you want me to do?" "Keep doing your job. Document everything, and be prepared for scrutiny. When someone with an axe to grind starts filing complaints, even baseless ones, we have to take them seriously and investigate. It's a pain, but it's procedure." The HOA emergency meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, 3 days after the failed winter gala. The temperature had finally started to climb back into more reasonable ranges, hitting a balmy 20 degrees. The meeting was held in the community center, which had been cleared to reopen after I verified that all the heating equipment had been removed and the electrical system was stable. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row. The room filled up quickly, more people than I'd ever seen at an HOA meeting. Patricia held court at the front table, flanked by Helen Sawyer and 2 other board members, Dorothy Kim and James Martinez. Tom Wright was notably absent from the board table, sitting instead in the audience near me. Patricia called the meeting to order with her gavel, slamming it down harder than necessary. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here tonight to address a serious matter affecting our community. As you all know, our winter gala, an event that has been a Meadowbrook Estates tradition for 5 years, was shut down by Robert Zimmerman, who abused his position as fire marshal to disrupt a community gathering." Several people murmured agreement. I saw heads nodding. Robert claimed there were safety violations, but what he really did was exercise his personal vendetta against me and this HOA board. Earlier on the day of the gala, I had asked Robert to contribute space heaters to help warm the community center during this unprecedented cold snap. He refused, which is his right, though it showed a disappointing lack of community spirit. However, he then showed up at our event and shut it down, claiming safety concerns that were completely fabricated. I raised my hand. Patricia ignored me. The heaters we used were brand new, purchased from Home Depot that very day. They were being operated according to manufacturer specifications. The electrical system was checked by the power company. We had taken every reasonable precaution, but Robert decided that wasn't good enough. "Patricia." I stood up. "That's not accurate. You'll have a chance to speak when I'm done, Robert. Please sit down. Actually, if you're going to misrepresent what happened, I think I should correct the record now." James Martinez, one of the board members, spoke up. "Let him talk, Patricia. We're here to get to the truth." Patricia glared at James but nodded curtly. "Fine. Robert, tell us your version of events." I walked to the front of the room, pulling out my phone where I had photos from the inspection. "First, let me be clear about the timeline. Patricia came to my home at 7 in the morning on Saturday, January 4th, and demanded that I give her my personal space heaters for the HOA event. When I refused, she threatened me with HOA fines and citations. I warned her at that time that overloading the community center with space heaters during a crowded event would be dangerous. I showed the first photo, a wide shot of the room setup. When I arrived at the community center Saturday evening, I observed 8 space heaters running simultaneously in a building with inadequate electrical capacity. Multiple extension cords, most of them underrated for the electrical load, were running across the floor, creating both trip hazards and fire risks. 2 heaters were positioned in bathrooms where they could come into contact with water. The room was at maximum occupancy with approximately 75 people, blocking egress routes. Patricia interrupted. Those heaters were all OL-listed and brand new. Being new and OL-listed doesn't make them safe when they're improperly used. The extension cords were getting hot, which indicates they were overloaded. The electrical system was tripping breakers repeatedly. You had neighbors running cords from outdoor outlets, which is explicitly prohibited in winter conditions because moisture can cause short circuits. I showed another photo, a close-up of one of the warm extension cords. This is a fire waiting to happen. Dorothy Kim, another board member, leaned forward. Robert, were you there in your official capacity as fire marshal or as a resident with a grudge? I was invited by Tom Wright, and I identified myself officially upon arrival. Once I observed the violations, I had a legal obligation to act. The Colorado Fire Code doesn't give me discretion to ignore hazards just because they're politically inconvenient. But you could have warned Patricia earlier, Helen Sawyer said. You could have offered to inspect the setup before the event started, helped us do it safely. Instead, you waited until we had a room full of guests and then shut us down in the most humiliating way possible. I did warn Patricia earlier. I warned her at 7 that morning when she came to my house. I warned her again when I went to the community center that afternoon and saw the heaters being set up. She told me I was being dramatic and kicked me out of the building. I went back that evening because Tom called me with concerns about the electrical setup, and what I found was worse than I'd feared. Tom spoke up from the audience. That's true. I called Robert because I was worried someone was going to get hurt. The breakers were tripping constantly, and Patricia kept finding ways to add more heaters. It was out of control. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. You betrayed this board, Tom. You had no right to undermine my authority like that. Your authority doesn't override safety concerns, Tom shot back. And it certainly doesn't override the law. The meeting devolved into chaos for a few minutes, with people shouting over each other. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly until the room quieted down. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia said, her voice icy with control. We're going to vote on whether Robert Zimmerman's actions constituted abuse of power and harassment of the HOA board. If the majority votes yes, we'll be filing formal complaints with the county and pursuing legal action for damages related to the canceled event. James Martinez shook his head. Patricia, we can't vote on whether a county official did their job properly. That's not how any of this works. We can vote on whether his actions were warranted, and we can vote on whether to pursue complaints. That's well within our authority. Actually, it's not, I said. You can file complaints if you want, that's your right as a citizen. But holding a vote to create the appearance of community consensus for what amounts to a personal grievance is inappropriate. The fire code violations were real, documented, and legally actionable. My decision to shut down the event wasn't up for debate or vote. Patricia's face was turning red. You don't get to tell this board what we can and can't vote on. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm explaining that voting on whether I properly enforce the fire code is meaningless. The law is the law, regardless of how many people vote. Dorothy Kim cleared her throat. I move that we table this discussion. I think we need to review the actual fire code regulations and consult with an attorney before we proceed. Second, James Martinez said immediately. Patricia looked betrayed. Are you serious? We called this emergency meeting specifically to address this issue. And we can address it properly at the next regular meeting after we've done our due diligence, Dorothy said. I'm not comfortable voting on something this serious without understanding the legal framework. The motion to table passed 3-2, with only Patricia and Helen voting against it. Patricia adjourned the meeting with obvious anger, refusing to make eye contact with anyone as people filed out. I left quickly, not wanting to get drawn into any more confrontations. But as I walked to my truck, I heard footsteps behind me. Robert, wait up. It was Marcus Chen, my neighbor from down the street. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for what you did. My wife is a nurse, and she was freaking out about the safety of that event. She didn't want to go, but Patricia made it sound like attendance was mandatory. Attendance at HOA events is never mandatory. Try telling Patricia that. She has this way of making you feel like you're betraying the entire community if you don't do what she wants. We talked for a few more minutes, and several other neighbors came over to express support. Apparently, Patricia's reign of terror had made her more enemies than friends, and people were quietly glad that someone had finally stood up to her. But not everyone felt that way. Over the next week, I started receiving notices from the HOA about alleged violations of community rules. My trash can was apparently visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day. My car was parked 6 inches over the line of my designated space. My front door wreath was not in compliance with the approved decorative standards. Each notice came with a warning that fines would be assessed if the violations weren't corrected within 48 hours. I documented everything and responded to each notice with photos showing that the alleged violations either didn't exist or were so minor as to be ridiculous. But it was time-consuming and annoying, which was exactly Patricia's goal. She was trying to make my life so miserable that I'd either apologize or move. The situation escalated on a Tuesday morning when I found a formal citation taped to my door. According to the notice, I was being fined $500 for disrupting a community event and bringing disrepute to the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. The citation referenced the winter gala shutdown and demanded payment within 30 days. I photographed the citation and immediately called my attorney, Rachel Foster, who I'd worked with on a property dispute a few years back. She listened to the whole story and laughed. Robert, this is absurd. They can't fine you for doing your job, especially a job that involves public safety. This wouldn't hold up for 5 minutes in court. So what do I do? Write a response explaining that the citation is invalid and that you're refusing to pay. Keep copies of everything. If they try to pursue collection or put a lien on your property, we'll shut them down immediately. In fact, you might have grounds for a harassment lawsuit if this continues. I drafted the response and hand-delivered it to Patricia's house. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tight tank top, clearly just back from a workout. Her expression went cold when she saw me. You can't be here. This is harassment. I'm delivering a formal response to your invalid citation. I'm refusing to pay the fine, and I'm putting you on notice that continued harassment through frivolous HOA citations will result in legal action. I handed her the envelope. She took it but didn't open it. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think because you have a badge and a title that you're untouchable, but you live in this community, Robert, and that means you're subject to our rules just like everyone else. I will find a way to make you comply or make you leave. That's a promise. Patricia, I've complied with every legitimate HOA rule since I moved here. What you're doing now isn't enforcement, it's retaliation, and it needs to stop. We'll see what a judge says about that. She closed the door in my face. I walked back to my truck, feeling the weight of this stupid conflict settling on my shoulders. I'd dealt with difficult people my entire career, but Patricia's combination of petness and persistence was exhausting. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the third Thursday of January. The agenda, posted on the community bulletin board, included a line item about ongoing community concerns regarding resident conduct and HOA authority. It was clearly about me. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed again. Patricia had apparently been rallying her supporters, and there was a definite tension in the air. I took my usual seat in the back row, next to Tom Wright. "This is going to be ugly," Tom whispered. "Patricia's been working the phones all week, trying to get people on her side." Patricia called the meeting to order and worked through the standard agenda items with unusual speed. When she got to the item about resident conduct, she paused dramatically. "As many of you know, we've been dealing with a situation involving a resident who believes he's above the rules that govern our community. Robert Zimmerman, who works as fire marshal for Boulder County, shut down our winter gala and has since refused to accept responsibility for his actions. The board has issued a fine which he is refusing to pay. Tonight, we need to discuss our next steps." Dorothy Kim interrupted. "Patricia, I thought we agreed to table this discussion until we consulted with an attorney." "We did consult with an attorney," Patricia said smoothly. "I spoke with Harold Benson from Benson and Associates. He confirmed that the HOA has the authority to fine residents for conduct detrimental to the community." "Can we see that opinion in writing?" James Martinez asked. "It was a phone consultation, but I took detailed notes." Patricia pulled out a notebook. "According to Mr. Benson, the HOA bylaws give us broad authority to enforce community standards, and shutting down a community event absolutely qualifies as detrimental conduct." I raised my hand. "Did Mr. Benson know that I shut down the event in my official capacity as fire marshal, enforcing state fire code?" I explained the situation fully. Patricia snapped. "Did you mention that the electrical system was overloaded, that extension cords were overheating, and that I had legal authority and obligation to act?" I told him your version of events, yes. "My version. Patricia, I have photographs, witness statements, and a formal inspection report." "These aren't opinions, they're documented facts." Helen Sawyer raised her hand. "I was there, and I think Robert is exaggerating what happened. The heaters were warm, yes, but they weren't overheating. The extension cords were fine. He's making it sound much more dangerous than it was." "Were you touching the cords to check their temperature?" I asked. "Well, no, but I was. Several of them were hot enough to cause burns with prolonged contact. That's a clear indicator of overcurrent." The meeting went in circles for 30 minutes, with Patricia's supporters insisting I'd overreacted and other residents pointing out that safety concerns should always be taken seriously. Finally, Dorothy Kim had enough. "I move that we retain an independent attorney to review this matter and provide a written opinion on the HOA's authority and potential liability. Until we have that opinion, I move that we suspend any fines or punitive actions against Robert Zimmerman." "Second," James Martinez said. Patricia's expression could have frozen the sun. "This board is supposed to support each other, not undermine our authority at every turn." Supporting each other doesn't mean blindly following bad decisions, Dorothy said. If we pursue this without proper legal guidance, we could be exposing the HOA to significant liability. I'm trying to protect the community, Patricia. The motion passed 3-2, the same split as before. Patricia adjourned the meeting immediately, gathering her papers and storming out without the usual pleasantries. I thought that would be the end of it, at least temporarily. But 2 days later, I got a call from Angela Morrison, my deputy chief. "Robert, we have a problem. Someone filed a formal complaint with the state fire marshal's office, alleging that you're living in unsafe conditions, specifically related to space heater usage, and that you abused your position to shut down a community event to cover up your own violations." You've got to be kidding me. I wish I was. The state office has to investigate all complaints. They're sending an inspector to your residence tomorrow at 10 a.m. You need to be there. This is Patricia's doing, probably, but you still have to cooperate with the investigation. The inspector who showed up the next morning was a guy named Ed Williams, someone I'd worked with on training exercises. He looked embarrassed as I let him into my townhouse. "Robert, I'm sorry about this. I know it's politically motivated, but I have to do a full inspection." "I understand. Do what you need to do." Ed spent an hour checking my 3 space heaters, verifying that they were properly rated on separate circuits with adequate clearance from furniture and walls. He checked my smoke detectors, my fire extinguisher, my egress routes, everything. When he was done, he shook his head. "Your setup is textbook perfect. Whoever filed this complaint was wasting everyone's time. Can you put that in your report?" "Absolutely. I'm going to note that the complaint appears to be retaliatory in nature and that no violations were found." That should help if she tries to escalate further. After Ed left, I decided it was time to go on offense. I called my attorney, Rachel Foster, and asked her to draft a cease and desist letter to Patricia Hendricks and the HOA board, demanding that they stop the harassment and withdraw the invalid fine. Rachel was enthusiastic. "I'll also include a notice that if the harassment continues, we'll be filing suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and abuse of process." That should get their attention. The letter was delivered 3 days later. I know because Patricia called me within an hour of receiving it, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you threaten this board with legal action? We're volunteers trying to maintain property values and community standards. You're the one who's been violating those standards and refusing to accept consequences. Patricia, you issued an invalid fine based on my enforcement of state law. You've filed false complaints with my employer. You've issued multiple frivolous citations for non-existent violations. That's textbook harassment and it needs to stop. We have documentation of every citation we've issued. Those violations were real, really. You cited me for having my trash can visible from the street, but the HOA bylaws allow trash cans to be placed out the night before collection day, which is exactly what I did. You cited me for parking over the line when my truck was completely within my designated space. You're making things up to justify your retaliation. This conversation is over. You'll be hearing from our attorney." She hung up. I sat there for a moment, wondering how a simple dispute over space heaters had spiraled into this nightmare. All I'd done was my job, and now I was in a legal battle with my HOA. The situation might have continued escalating if not for what happened the following week. On a Wednesday evening, I got a call from dispatch about a structure fire at the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. I was off duty, but the address made my blood run cold. I arrived 10 minutes later to find smoke pouring from the building's roof. Fire crews from Station 7 and Station 2 were already on scene, pulling hoses and preparing to enter. I found the incident commander, Captain Sarah Brooks, coordinating the response. "Sarah, what happened?" "Looks like an electrical fire in the main room. Someone reported seeing smoke around 6 p.m. Building was empty, thank God. We're still trying to locate the source." I helped coordinate the response while firefighters entered the building. It took 40 minutes to knock down the flames, and another hour to clear the smoke and secure the scene. Once the fire investigators arrived and began their work, I went inside to see the damage. The main room was a disaster. The ceiling had partially collapsed, water damage covered everything, and the smell of burned insulation and plastic hung in the air. The fire investigators traced the source to an electrical outlet on the west wall, the same wall where Patricia had been running multiple space heaters during the winter gala. Fire investigator Michelle Torres called me over to look at the outlet. "Robert, check this out." The outlet was melted and charred, the wiring behind it exposed and blackened. This was overloaded repeatedly. You can see the damage to the internal wiring. It probably developed a hot spot that smoldered for days before finally catching. From the gala, most likely. If they were running heavy loads through this outlet, which it looks like they were, it would have stressed the connections. Loose connections lead to arcing, which generates heat. Eventually, something gives. Michelle took extensive photographs and samples for analysis. "This is going in my report. If anyone had been in this building when it went up, we could be looking at casualties." Patricia arrived while the investigators were still working. She stood in the parking lot, staring at the smoking ruin of the community center, her face ashen. I walked over to her. "Patricia." She didn't respond, just kept staring at the building. "The fire started in the electrical system. The investigators think it was caused by overloading during the gala." She finally looked at me. "That's impossible. We removed all the heaters that night. Everything was unplugged." The damage was already done. Running that much current through old wiring creates problems that don't show up immediately. It takes time for the connections to fail. "You're saying this is my fault." "I'm saying this is what I was trying to prevent. This is exactly why I shut down the event." If this fire had started while the building was full of people, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Patricia sat down on the curb, looking lost. Helen Sawyer came running up, saw the damage, and started crying. Other residents began arriving, drawn by the fire trucks and smoke. Everyone stood around in stunned silence, watching firefighters work. The investigation took 2 weeks. Michelle Torres submitted a comprehensive report concluding that the fire was caused by electrical failure due to overcurrent conditions, consistent with multiple high-wattage appliances being operated simultaneously on a circuit with inadequate capacity. The report specifically mentioned the winter gala setup as the likely cause of the initial damage that led to the fire. The HOA called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. The community center was obviously unusable, so we met at Patricia's house, crowding into her living room. Patricia looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. "I'm sure you've all seen the fire investigation report," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The investigator concluded that the fire was caused by electrical damage from the heaters we used at the winter gala. The room was silent. "I want to apologize," Patricia continued. "To the community, to the board, and especially to Robert. I was wrong. I should have listened when he warned me about the safety issues. I was so focused on making sure the event happened, on not looking weak or indecisive, that I ignored legitimate concerns. And now our community center is destroyed because of my stubbornness." It was the last thing I'd expected to hear. Patricia, who'd spent weeks attacking me and trying to make my life miserable, was actually apologizing. Dorothy Kim spoke up. "Patricia, the insurance should cover most of the rebuilding costs. It's not the end of the world." "Actually," Patricia said, pulling out a letter, "the insurance company is denying our claim. They say the fire was caused by willful negligence and violation of safety codes, which isn't covered under our policy. We're on the hook for the entire cost of repairs, which the adjusters estimate at $350,000. The room erupted. People shouted questions, accusations, and demands. Patricia just sat there taking it all. James Martinez finally got everyone quiet. "Okay, we need to think about this rationally. Can we contest the insurance denial? We can try," Patricia said. "But I spoke with an attorney yesterday, and he said the insurance company has a strong case. The fire report is pretty damning, and there's another problem. If we can't pay for repairs, we'll have to levy a special assessment on all homeowners. Based on our numbers, that would be about $4,000 per household." The room erupted again. $4,000 was a huge hit for most families, especially coming right after the holidays. People were furious, and all that anger was directed at Patricia. "You need to resign," Tom Wright said. "Patricia, you've caused enormous damage to this community through your negligence. You need to step down as HOA president." "I agree," Dorothy said. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Patricia's leadership. All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up except Helen Sawyer's. Patricia didn't even vote for herself. "The motion passes unanimously," Dorothy said. "Patricia, please tender your resignation to the board in writing by the end of the week. We'll hold elections for a new president at next month's meeting." Patricia nodded, tears running down her face. "I'll resign tonight. And I want you all to know that I'll be contributing personally to the repair fund. It won't cover everything, but I'll do what I can to make this right." After the meeting, I caught up with Patricia as she was escorting people out of her house. "Patricia, can we talk for a minute?" She nodded, and we stepped into her kitchen away from the remaining residents. "I don't want to pile on," I said. "You're already dealing with a lot, but I need to know that the harassment stops here. The bogus citations, the complaints to my employer, all of it. It's done," Patricia said. "I already sent a letter to the state fire marshal's office withdrawing my complaint and apologizing for wasting their time. And I've destroyed all the citation paperwork I had on you. I'm so sorry, Robert. I was petty and vindictive, and I put people at risk because of my ego. You tried to stop me, and I made your life hell for it. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I didn't want any of this to happen. I just wanted to keep people safe. I know. I see that now. Over the next few months, the community worked together to deal with the aftermath of the fire. The insurance company held firm on their denial, so the HOA did have to levy a special assessment. After much debate, they settled on $2,000 per household, with Patricia contributing $50,000 of her own money. It was still a significant hit for everyone, but the community rallied. A new board was elected with Dorothy Kim as president, James Martinez as vice president, and Tom Wright as treasurer. One of their first acts was to formally apologize to me and rescind all the citations and fines Patricia had issued. The community center took 8 months to rebuild. When it finally reopened in September, the new board threw a grand reopening party. They invited me to speak, which felt weird, but I agreed. Standing in front of my neighbors, I kept it simple. I'm glad we have our community center back. I'm glad nobody was hurt in the fire. And I hope we've all learned something about the importance of taking safety seriously, even when it's inconvenient. Patricia was there, standing in the back. She gave me a small nod, which I returned. She'd lost her position, spent a fortune, and suffered enormous public embarrassment. But she'd owned her mistakes and tried to make amends. That counted for something. The new community center had an upgraded electrical system, clearly marked circuits with maximum load ratings posted on the walls, and a strict policy about heating equipment that required fire marshal approval before any event. Dorothy Kim asked me to serve on a new safety committee, and I agreed. Life in Meadowbrook Estates gradually returned to normal. The HOA became less of a dictatorship and more of an actual community organization. People still complained about parking and trash cans and holiday decorations, because that's just how HOAs work, but the petty vindictiveness was gone. As for Patricia, she kept a low profile for months. She stopped coming to HOA meetings and social events. But eventually, she started reappearing, usually accompanied by Helen. She never tried to reclaim her position of power, which everyone appreciated. At the following year's winter gala, held in the rebuilt community center with proper heating and electrical capacity, Patricia came up to me during the buffet line. "The room looks great, doesn't it?" she said. "It does. They did a good job with the rebuild." "Robert, I never really thanked you properly. For shutting down the first gala, I mean. If you hadn't, if that fire had started with all those people in here, God knows what would have happened. We don't have to keep going over this, Patricia. I know. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. You weren't trying to make me look bad or undermine my authority. You were doing your job and you were right. I appreciate that." She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it looked genuine. "Enjoy the party, Robert, and stay warm." I watched her walk away, rejoining Helen at a table by the windows. The new space heaters, commercial-grade units properly installed by licensed electricians, hummed quietly in the corners. The lights twinkled, music played, and people laughed and ate, and enjoyed themselves without worrying about fire hazards or electrical failures. It had taken a destroyed building, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and months of community strife, but Meadowbrook Estates had finally learned that some rules exist for good reasons. Safety regulations aren't bureaucratic obstacles designed to ruin people's fun. They're lessons written in the blood and ashes of past disasters, meant to prevent future tragedies. As I stood there in the warm community center, surrounded by neighbors who'd stopped seeing me as the enemy and started seeing me as someone trying to keep them safe, I felt a sense of resolution. The fight with Patricia hadn't been fun. It had been exhausting and frustrating and at times infuriating, but it had ended the right way, with understanding instead of continued hostility. I grabbed a plate of food and joined Tom Wright and Marcus Chen at a table. We talked about normal things, everyday life, work and family, and the upcoming Broncos season. No one mentioned the fire or Patricia's fall from grace, or the battle over space heaters that had started everything. Sometimes the best ending is when you can finally stop talking about the problem because it's actually solved. That night, eating mediocre catered food in a warm room with adequate electrical capacity and proper safety equipment, I felt like we'd earned that kind of ending. The next morning, I went into the office and found a thank you card on my desk. Inside, in neat handwriting, it read, "Thank you for doing the right thing, even when it was hard. Our community is safer because of you. With gratitude, the Meadowbrook Estates HOA Board." I pinned it to my bulletin board, next to my certifications and commendations. It wasn't an award or official recognition, just a simple card. But it meant more than any plaque or ceremony could have, because at the end of the day, that's what the job is about. Not glory or recognition, not winning arguments or proving you're right. It's about keeping people safe, even when they don't want to be kept safe, even when they fight you every step of the way. Patricia Hendricks had demanded my space heaters for her party during a freeze. She hadn't realized I was the fire marshal who would shut her down. But more importantly, she hadn't realized that shutting her down was the kindest thing anyone could have done for her and for our community. Sometimes you have to save people from themselves. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they eventually thank you for it.